Okay, students, Module 2, Legacy and Machine Politics. Um, Basically, I noticed that people are kind of finding their rhythm there. Some answers are single, statement or whatever. That's fine, given the amount of reading and the amount of writing that's being expected of you. I have no problem with that. So the deal is write an answer that sufficiently answers the question. All right, deal. Question one: describe how anti-urban attitudes formed. Basically, anti-attitudes were not just resulting from the fear of immigrants, it's partially, but also filth and crime. So you want to make sure you cover at least those. I saw most people said something about the immigrants and understood. I mean, that was the big news of the day. But there were other things that were also leading to that anti-urban attitude. Remember, urban, that's city. So basically, people are wanting to get out of Dodge, right? Um, Immigrants coming into the cities, that was the first stop for them. That's why they were pretty much associated with that fear, that anti urban attitude, but it wasn't just exclusively them. So be careful to differentiate that. Question two: after marketing, what did civic boosters employ to promote their local cities? Local government resources, and if available, the railroads. Make sure you cover both of those. Railroads, yeah, but railroads weren't everywhere. So make sure, especially the local government resources, have the a local entity pay for a lot, and go from there. So and remember, civic boosters. We're talking private individuals or organizations, and they are engaging the local government. That's how that's working, right? Question three: to what do the authors attribute New York's falling share in the nation's urban population? Well, westward expansion. It wasn't that they were shrinking; it was that the rest of the country was growing, and everybody was moving west. And so, in the scheme of things, yeah, New York, they kept growing and growing and growing, but everything else was, a lot of times people were coming in from the East Coast and then moving on. So westward expansion. Make sure you cover that. Question four, the end of the subsection, A Century of Urban Growth, describe the three tiers of cities mentioned by the authors. Well, you got the industrial powerhouses. Those are the big guys that, the big urban centers, right, where industry is. Specialized economies, they might not necessarily have like a major river, that industry could, utilize, or resources or whatever. So they might have a niche industry, whatever. And then you've got your small towns that kind of cater to more the farming, the agricultural, industry, whatever. They basically they are just there to fulfill the needs of the local community, right? Question five: what were some of the varieties of transportation connections mentioned in the subsection Inter-Urban Rivalries? So I think most people got this. Turnpikes, railroads, and canals. Okay, so you got the turnpikes, roadways, railroads, now that's a different mode of transportation, and then canals, waterways, right? Short aside, now two other modes have been added, right? Air travel, okay, wasn't necessarily available back then, but air travel, and space travel. Just interesting side note, Port Canaveral is one of the few communities in the country that actually has all five modes of transportation, and it's Port Authority. See, so they got the Cape, got NASA over there, so just trivia night. Maybe I'll win you a beer or something like that, right? Okay, question six: an industrialized community. I'm sorry, that's a subsection. In industrialization and community, the term walking city is used to explain how it impacted urban growth. Well, it was the dominant form of transportation, right? I mean, that's the get-go, was man was walking. So, but in this case, you figure about it, it was most people walked. I mean, you have walking, then you have horses, and wagons, and you have, all the things that came after it. But at the very basic level, you have walking. So what it did was it actually limited the expansion of the cities. You couldn't have someone walking for 5 hours out of the day, to get to work, and then work a full day plus, and then come back again. So they were limited in their size as far as how they could, how far they could branch out. How did transportation improvements impact cities? This is question 7. Well, transportation improvements enabled people to commute further away from the urban core. Okay, like I said, you start out maybe at the very onset. You have an industry, some business, whatever moves in. Let's say they go in by a river. They've got the big paddle wheels, and it helps turn their machines. All of a sudden, you've got a new transportation improvement. After people build up there, they say, okay, well, how about this? What did they get? They went into the trolley systems, and then that helped people, move further out, like we just discussed in a previous question. The anti-urban, the people are wanting to get out of Dodge, right? So okay, now you got a trolley. Hey, I can get to and from the city fairly quickly. And then, of course, later on, modern day, you have the roadways even further. So that's kind of how that all worked out. Let me see. Question 8. In Immigrant Tide, another subsection, what one word would you use to explain the draw of immigrants to the U.S. as it relates to the industrial economy? Opportunity. I think most people got that opportunity. It's not something that's going to be tested or whatever, but think about it. It's a concept. That's what they were looking at, man. They had dollar signs. Wow. I mean, I can go and get a job. They are looking for a lot of workers. There you go. If you answered something else, I'm not going to give you grief about it. Let me see here. Question 9. What were the 3 major reasons given by the authors to explain how municipal responsibilities increased? We had the new services that provided to mitigate disasters and crises. Local boosters assumed the lead in organizing public services. And then the growing middle class became intolerant of urban conditions. By the way, if some of my answers sound familiar, it's because I borrowed some of these from your responses. I've gone through and I've read all of them, and I'm like, okay, this one summed it up very well. So just so you know, I go in there so I don't have to reinvent the wheel is all. So just if it sounds familiar to you and you wrote it, it's like, well, take pride in knowing that the professor actually used what you wrote. Question 10, describe the attitude towards cities by many state legislators. Okay, hostile and indifferent. They didn't really care, even though cities and counties are creatures of the state. At this point, the text points out that being a state legislator a lot of times was a part-time job. They were like, okay, hostile. They didn't want anybody encroaching on their area, but for the most part, they were like, they didn't want to have anything to do with the cities. That was kind of the relationship at that point. Question 11 was one benefit of the machine politicians, as mentioned in the opening paragraph of the next chapter. Well, they provided a path where ethnic voters could get their foot in the door, the political system. That's one of their major takeaways for the machine politics, is that they helped immigrants to a certain degree assimilate and get their foot in the door. Why did they prosper? That's question 12. Because of the social and political environment, right? They said it pointed out those they nurtured the tightly knit communities, the pockets of immigrants. You had the Greek community, Little Havana. I'm using a modern day reference, but Little China, whatever. And so people like to group. They're birds of a feather, right? That was like in one of my other classes. You had the joining phenomenon, where people like to consider themselves American, but they also considered themselves, let's say, a Greek American or a English American or whatever, German American, whatever, because they clung to those old world, ways, the food, the dress, the dance, the music, all that stuff. So anyway, that's how they kind of came to be. The machines kind of embraced that, and they knew to work that. Hey, they're not going to criticize you. They're pretty much one of you, right? And so they rose to power. Question 13. What was the primary difference between James and Tom Pendergrast? It's not a big issue. This one and the last question, I just wanted you basically to read their stories and to see how they operated and, understand what they were going through and learn from their successes. Like in Jim's condition, he would do whatever it took to meet the constituents' needs. His brother was just basically corrupt, a lackey that he didn't network like his brother Jim did, and so therefore he certainly, he was powerful, but he didn't wield the same power as Jim did. Jim was more of a true leader, it seems. Question 14, explain how the mass electorate came to be as it's described in The Origins of Machine Politics. Okay, it coincided with the rise of urbanization. Urbanization, when the cities are, when people are moving from out in the rural areas and come into the cities to work at the factories and things like that, right? So the immigrants en masse coming into our country, they had the pockets of immigrants that clustered together with those similar backgrounds. Thank you, John Lockwood, one of your colleagues. I ganked that from his post. So understand, that's what became the mass electorate. All these people coming in and, wielding that power. Question 15, did machines get the job done? Why or why not? Yeah, they helped the immigrants to assimilate, admittedly. But the text also pointed out the selfishness of a lot of the local politicos. It didn't really fully manifest the way, is promised. Hey, everything's going to be great for you. You just vote the way we want you to, and we're going to take care of you. Not necessarily. Let me see here. Question 16, were those machines vehicles of upward mobility? Not really. Pretty much the same answers. They, yes, they help you assimilate, but for the most part, most groups, it actually points out, the text actually points out the various groups, the Irish that came over, the Black Americans, everything else, it didn't really give them that upward mobility, as they were hoping. Let me see here. Did machines help them assimilate? I just answered that. I don't know why I put it as a second question, whatever, but yes. Lastly, was summarize the accomplishments of Hazen Pingree. I guess that's how you pronounce it. Again, that's one of those things where I just wanted you to read about his his accomplishments and read what he did for Detroit, things like that. So anyway, that's pretty much it. I'll see you next time.